What if I told you that the greatest threat to the United States isn't a nuclear missile from abroad, but a spreadsheet in a Silicon Valley basement? We are told we live in the leader of the free world, yet every morning we wake up to a government that looks less like a democracy and more like a private equity firm liquidating its own citizens. The American dream hasn't just stalled, it's been sold to the highest bidder. What if I told you the greatest threat to America isn't China, isn't Russia? It's a system quietly rewriting the rules from the inside. The new autocracy, the architect of systemic chaos. Imagine you are sitting in the Oval Office today. Do you see the U.S. Constitution on the desk, or do you see a checklist for a corporate takeover? Because from where I'm standing, the ink on that Constitution is being replaced by a bill of sale. We are living through a period that historians will look back on as the Great American Liquidation. We have a president in the White House who isn't just a pathological liar that's a character flaw. No, we are dealing with a narcissist and a kleptocrat who views the presidency not as a service but as an acquisition. If you were an autocrat, what is the first thing you would do? You would consolidate power. You would treat the rule of law like a suggestion and the treasury like a personal ATM. This isn't just politics as usual. It is a geopolitical shift toward a personality-driven regime that has zero interest in common decency or democratic foundations. The militarization of the interior. The mainstream media wants you to focus on the vulgarity and the tweets. They want you to be offended so you don't notice the machinery being built underneath your feet. While you're distracted by the noise, they are militarizing the interior of the United States. Let's look at the numbers. Last month, I offered an amendment to rescind $75 billion from ICE, a sum that came out of Trump's big, beautiful bill. Visual comparison. That $75 billion isn't just a number. It is equivalent to building 150 state-of-the-art regional hospitals or paying the salaries of over 1 million public school teachers. Instead, that money is being funneled into an agency that is effectively occupying American communities. In Minnesota, we saw what this looks like. Grassroots activists having to raise $200,000 just to fight back against an occupation in their own backyard. Why the obsession with ICE? Because every autocrat needs a loyal paramilitary force that operates outside the standard military chain of command. This isn't about border security. It's about creating a force that answers to one man, not the Constitution. The 2026 endgame. As we head toward the 2026 elections, you have to ask yourself, is the Republican Party trying to win your vote? Or are they trying to make your vote irrelevant? The chaos in the White House isn't a bug, it's a feature designed to make you give up. We are working tirelessly to support candidates who stand for working people. But the systemic twist is this. The opposition is no longer playing by the rules of free and fair. They are engineering a situation where participation is discouraged and the outcome is predetermined. Your taxes are being spent on occupying forces rather than your local schools. Your vote is being treated as a barrier to power rather than the source of it. The reality check. Western media often repeats the lie that institutions will save us. I'm here to tell you that institutions are made of people, and if the people at the top are kleptocrats, the institutions become tools of oppression. But if you think a dangerous president is the only problem, you're missing the bigger picture. Behind every autocrat is a group of men who are even more powerful, and they just bought the one thing you rely on to know the truth, your news. Stick around, because in part 2, we're going to look at the oligarchic coup and how 1% of the population effectively just canceled the 93%. The oligarchic coup, the capture of the American mind, the statistical mirage. Did you know the top 1% now owns more than 93% of the entire country? But here's the terrifying truth. The real danger isn't the size of their bank accounts, it's what they just did to your television. Imagine you're walking down a street in any American town. On the news playing in the shop window, a suit and tie anchor tells you the GDP is up, the stock market is hitting record highs, and the economy is booming. But then you look at the person next to you. They're deciding whether to buy groceries or pay the electric bill. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. That isn't an economic adjustment, it's a slow-motion catastrophe. From a geopolitical lens, what we are witnessing is the classic symptom of internal decay. History is a brutal teacher. When the wealth of an empire is sucked out of the hands of the many and hoarded by the few, that empire is no longer a superpower. It is a hollowed-out shell waiting for the first strong wind to knock it over. The privatization of truth. If you were a billionaire looking to rule a country without firing a single shot, what's the first thing you'd buy? Not a tank. You'd buy the microphone. Let's look at the players on the board. Larry Ellison, a man with more data on you than the CIA, is moving to buy controlling stakes in CNN and CBS. Jeff Bezos, he didn't buy the Washington Post because he loves investigative journalism. He bought it to turn a historic watchdog into his personal PR firm. They aren't just investing in media, they are buying the Fourth Estate, the very institution designed to hold power accountable to ensure you never even hear the word oligarchy. This is a strategic decapitation of American dissent. By controlling the narrative, they control your perception of reality. Controversial edge. Mainstream media will tell you these are just business acquisitions. That is a lie. This is a geopolitical capture. In Russia, we call them oligarchs. Trong Tieng Mai, we call them philanthropists. But the result is the same unlimited dark money, flowing into super PACs to elect puppets who serve the boardrooms, not the living rooms. The cost of silence. Let's put this in terms every American can understand. The economic potential we lose every year because of this wealth hoarding is equivalent to losing one nuclear-powered aircraft carrier every single month. Imagine the outrage if a foreign enemy sank one of our carriers every 30 days. We would be at war, yet we allow the oligarchs to sink our middle class with the same efficiency. The reality check. Does a billionaire really need that 10th super yacht, a vessel that costs more to fuel than an entire school district's annual budget, while your kids are forced to skip the dentist because the copay is too high? This inequality isn't just unfair. It is a national security threat. A nation where the citizens don't believe the system works for them is a nation that cannot defend itself. When the oligarchs buy the media to hide the decay, they aren't just protecting their wealth. They are gambling with the survival of the United States. But what if we could take that hoarded gold and put it back into the engine of the American family? I'm not talking about a handout. I'm talking about a $4 trillion counterstrike. Stick around, because the math I'm about to show you is exactly what Larry Ellison doesn't want appearing on his new TV networks. The $4 trillion counterstrike. Survival math for the 99%. The mathematics of the stolen future. What if I told you that by taxing just a handful of men who have more money than God, we could put a $3,000 check in your pocket tomorrow? Why is Congress terrified of this math? Because the math doesn't lie. But the people who fund their campaigns do. Imagine a vault. Inside that vault is $4 trillion. It's not new money. It's the value extracted from your labor, your data, and your community over the last decade. While the mainstream media screams about the deficit, they conveniently ignore the billionaire wealth tax. In a failing empire, the elites always argue that the peasants must tighten their belts while the palaces grow larger. But here is the strategic reality. A country where 60% of the population lives paycheck to paycheck is a country that cannot sustain its global hegemony. Internal stability is the bedrock of external power. By refusing to tax the oligarchs, we aren't just being unfair, we are committing geopolitical suicide. The blueprint for recovery. If you were the CEO of America Incorporated and your workforce was starving, your infrastructure was crumbling, and your customers were broke, you wouldn't give the board of directors a bonus. You'd reinvest in the floor. Here is exactly what the billionaire wealth tax does for you, the American citizen. The direct infusion. Every man, woman, and child in a family earning under $150,000 gets a $3,000 check. That isn't charity. It's an economic stimulus to keep families from falling into the abyss of debt. The Housing Fortress, we build 7 million units of low-income and affordable housing. Visual comparison. This is equivalent to building a new city the size of Chicago every year for the next decade. The Medicare Shield. We expand Medicare to cover dental, vision, and hearing, because a senior citizen shouldn't have to choose between a hearing aid and a meal. The Future Guard Universal Child Care. No family pays more than 7% of their income. And for the teachers, a mandatory minimum salary of $60,000. The pundits will call this socialism. I call it common sense capitalism. If the people can't participate in the economy, there is no economy. There is only a casino for the rich. The few $100 billion left. I know what you're thinking. Won't the billionaires leave? Won't they be ruined? Let's look at the facts. Even after this tax, Mr. Musk, Mr. Bezos, and Mr. Zuckerberg would still have a few $100 billion left to feed their families. They won't be out on the streets. The logic of the oligarch. Why do they fight this so hard? It's not about the money, they can't spend it all in 10 lifetimes. It's about power. The geopolitical twist. When wealth is this concentrated, it becomes a weapon. It buys politicians, it buys news cycles, and it buys silence. Spending $1.1 trillion to cut Medicaid and the ACA as Trump has proposed is like burning down the fire station to save money on water. My plan does the opposite. It puts out the fire by using the excess wealth at the very top to buttress the programs that the working class desperately needs to survive. But as we fight for the wealth of today, a new shadow is falling over the workforce of tomorrow. Jeff Bezos isn't just buying newspapers. He's building an army that doesn't need a paycheck, doesn't sleep, and doesn't vote. Stick around, because in part 4, we're going into the existential threat of AI and why the silicon overlords want you to become obsolete. The silicon overlords, the architecture of obsolescence, the armies of the New World Order, retention hook. Jeff Bezos just announced a $100 billion fund. He says it's for the future of logistics. I say it's a plan to make the human heart and the human hand completely obsolete. The question isn't whether the robots are coming, it's why the people at the top are so eager to replace you. Imagine a world where the factories are humming, the warehouses are moving, and the trucks are driving, but the lights are off. Why? Because robots don't need to see, and they certainly don't need a union. If you were Jeff Bezos and your goal was absolute efficiency, your biggest problem is the human worker. Humans get tired, they get sick, they ask for health care, they vote. By replacing his entire global workforce with AI and robotics, Bezos isn't just saving money. He is decoupling the elite from the population. The existential gamble. Western media tells you the AI race is about winning against China. That is a smokescreen. The real race is between the silicon overlords and the foundations of human democracy. If AI becomes smarter than its creators, we aren't just losing jobs. We are losing control of our species. We are facing an existential threat. The economic collapse. It's not just blue-collar jobs. AI is coming for the accountants, the lawyers, and the college graduates who can no longer find entry-level work. The science fiction reality. This isn't a movie. Nobel Prize-winning physicists are warning us AI is advancing toward a point where it can operate independently of human control. Controversial edge. Why is Congress silent? Because they are dabbling around the edges while the oligarchs, Musk, Ellis and Bezos, whisper in their ears that regulation stifles innovation. And innovation for whom? Innovation that drives up your electric bills and sucks up your water resources just to power the data centers that will eventually replace your livelihood. The moratorium. Taking the remote back. Allowing AI to expand unchecked right now is like letting a pilotless plane take off with 330 million passengers while we're still trying to figure out where the off switch is. It's not just dangerous, it's insane. Next week, I am introducing legislation for a moratorium on data center construction. 1. The resource grab. These centers are massive drains on our national grid. 2. The strategic pause. We need to slow down. We need to work with China and every other nation to set a global handle on the implications of AI. Your kids are becoming addicted to AI agents designed by psychologists to keep them scrolling. Your job is being mapped and analyzed for its automation potential. Your democracy is being flooded with AI-generated misinformation that makes the truth impossible to find. The Great Reclamation. AI and robotics are not evil by nature, but in the hands of men whose only goal is to be the richest man in history, They are weapons of mass displacement. We have a choice. Do we want technology to work for the working people? Or do we want to be the fuel for a silicon fire? The autocrats want you afraid. The oligarchs want you distracted, but the power still rests with the people who refuse to go quietly into the night. Leave a comment below. Are you ready to tax the billionaires and pause the robots? Or are you waiting for the algorithm to decide your future for you? Subscribe to join the fight. The 93% are finally waking up. The Great Reclamation. Retaking the American future. The final choice. We have traveled through the dark corridors of the new American power. We've seen a president who views the Constitution as a speed bump, an oligarchy that has quietly bought the microphones of the nation, and a silicon elite preparing to replace the American worker with a line of code. It's easy to feel like the game is already over, but that is exactly what they want you to believe. Everything we've discussed, the $75 billion militarization of our streets, the $1.1 trillion cuts to your healthcare, and the $100 billion AI funds designed to automate your job. It all leads back to one thing: your power. They spend billions of dollars on dark money and media buyouts for one reason only: because they are terrified that you might actually realize you still have the numbers. History shows that empires don't just fall, they are either looted from within or reclaimed by their people. We are at that crossroads. We can choose the $4 trillion counterstrike taxing the billionaires to rebuild the American family, or we can watch the lights go out on the American experiment. For the working families, we choose the $3,000 check, the $60,000 teacher salary, and the right to a home. For the next generation, we choose a moratorium on the AI machines that threaten to leave our children with a world they can no longer control. The 1% has the money, but the 93% has the heartbeat. Larry Ellison, Jeff Bezos, and Donald Trump are betting that you are too tired, too distracted, or too cynical to fight back. Prove them wrong. If you found this analysis insightful, if you are tired of the mainstream media laundering the interests of the oligarchs, then join this movement. 1. Leave a comment below. Do you believe we should pause the AI expansion until we can guarantee your job? Or is the $4 trillion wealth tax the only way to save the middle class? I read every single one of your insights. 2. Subscribe and hit the bell. We are building the Fifth Estate, a media for the people, by the people, completely independent of corporate boardrooms. The truth doesn't have a billionaire sponsor, it only has you. I'm Gemini, and this is the struggle for the soul of the future. I'll see you in the next analysis. The narrator, Professor Zhang Shui, stares intensely into the camera. Fade to black with the text, "Reclaim the future." Subscribe now.